أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. As I mentioned yesterday, this presentation was originally a teaching or an accompanying presentation for the course on An-Nubdha Al-Sughra, this book, which I translated back in 2015. That was the introduction to Habib Abu Bakr. The book is available in English. I'm not sure if it's available online anymore or not. Kind of like ran out of copies. Thinking about a second edition, critical edition. And the book is a primer in fiqh al-tahawulat. Fiqh al-tahawulat as the fiqh of transitions. But as part of looking into that again now, I thought it might be appropriate to use some elements of my PhD, which is this work here, and include something on the man, Habib Abu Bakr himself. Because it is important that when we talk about, yes, you have copies of the Nubdha, that was before it was published. I mean, that's the edited edition anyway. So I thought it might be beneficial that we talk about Habib Abu Bakr himself for various reasons. Reason number one is he wrote his own biography. So he is the best one to tell us how did he come about with these ideas. And reason number two is you cannot separate ideas from the context in which these ideas have been born. And number three, the biography can either confirm or negate the relevance of his ideas. Because if you had experience with certain parts of modernity, or you had certain experience with certain aspects of modernity, then you are in a position to talk about it. We can understand that you are in a position to talk about it. And we will not be able to know this unless we study biography. Biography is one of those difficult aspects. So, difficult aspects to write about. The variety of reasons. Number one is biography contains generally cognitive, historical, and linguistic processes that the subject of this biography engages with. So their upbringing, their learning, their political history of the place that they grew up in, the education, the language, the source of language, where did they learn whom did they learn their language from? Did they pick it from the street? Did they pick it from an elite family, for example, from a father, from a mother? And what kind of language do they speak? Is it religious language? Is it philosophical language? What kind of language do they speak? So biography contains all of this. But there is a problem also with so this is why biography is very important. But there is also a problem with biography. The problem with biography is if you are writing the biography of somebody else, you engage in selection. You select certain parts. You can't actually make a comprehensive biography of somebody else. So you're selecting and analyzing. In other words, you're creating a narrative based on an original narrative that was written by the person himself. In case, the case that we're dealing with, Habib Abu Bakr al-Mashur, he wrote his own biography, as I said, so he himself has decided to either consciously or unconsciously to suppress and to augment, to raise and to send to the back certain events and highlight certain events. If any of us decides to write their own life narrative, the biography, we will consciously or non-consciously be choosing certain parts to bring to the fore and to certain parts to send to the back, certain individuals to bring to the fore. So that's the problem. The problem is that the person himself practices selection, suppression, doing certain things with language. And then when you write a biography based on a biography, an experience that you have not witnessed, you practice another level of selection. So you're recreating a narrative. It is in this recreation of the narrative that you cannot take out yourself. So this is almost a mediated story of Habib Abu Bakr. A process of writing a biography is necessarily involves, as I said before, subordination and suppression of selected events and highlighting others. So the problem is not only in analyzing, but it is in the selection of the material that you're going to analyze later on. However, since the benefit of writing a biography outweighs neglecting biography completely, because we need to understand the context before we look into the ideas, we have to write a biography. A little bit to some people who do not know the Hadrami school. I'm sure everyone here heard about the Habayib and the Ba'alawis and all of that, but there is a little bit more to that story. Number one, Yemen as a region is a region that is always out of radar. It's not covered by big world events. It is not in the points of contact between East and West, at least in the books of history. So when we talk about modernity and contact between European ideas and Muslim world, we're thinking of Egypt, for example, in the recent centuries. We're thinking of Egypt, where it was a British colony for 75 years, from 1881 until 1954. We think about Turkey, where there was a very harsh clash between secularism and the Khilafah. We think of India, which was a British colony for a long period of time. And then we think of Singapore and Malaysia and, or that what they call Batavia, that region which was known at that time under the Dutch as a Dutch colony as Batavia. In fact, the first form of Orientalism in modern age did not appear within the ranks of British Orientalists. It actually appeared within the ranks of Dutch Orientalists. There is a man called Khornche, who was the first one to record Hajj in around 1875. Around 1875. And Khornche, who pretended to be a Muslim and went to Hajj and recorded the Kaaba and all of that, he went as a representative he traveled with the Indonesian community, with the Indonesian Hujjaj. And he was almost a cultural attaché in the kind of like the Dutch High Commission in Jakarta, or in Batavia, as it was known at the time. There was a lot of like war of ideas in the Muslim world at those days, but no one literally looks into Yemen itself, even though Yemen, as we will see, was a region that had its own reception of Western ideas. And Aden, specifically Aden, which is a port, and we will look into that in a second, was occupied, became a British colony in 1839. The Brits left Yemen in November 30th in 1967. So they were in the region for quite a bit, over a century. And in that century, there was a lot of interaction. Hadramaut as a region, this is a picture of Yemen. Hadramaut is that kind of like white part that you can see. Well, it shows here that's white here. It's a different color. But that white part, which they call the Protectorate of South Arabia. At the time, it was called the Protectorate of South Arabia. And if you can see in the bottom there, there is the Gulf of Aden, right? This is the Gulf of Aden, and where it says the Federation of South Arabia, Aden is there in the bottom. This is Aden. So Aden is a strategic port because it manipulates trade between the East and the West. It is before the Strait of Bab al-Mandab, which leads to the Red Sea, technically leading to Suez Canal. So it is one of the most important ports in the world because the whole trade that connects the Far East, spices and all exotics of the East and India, to the West. Aden stays there. It was because of that that the Brits decided to occupy Aden in 1839, as we said before, and they decided that Aden is going to be transformed into a cosmopolitan European city. And if you read the books on the history of Yemen, that's exactly what happened. And there was loads of things that the space of this course is not enough to talk about, how they promoted certain lifestyles, social clubs, certain ranks of the society. There was some promotion of Shia as well, Shia families in Yemen. There was, like they brought some Indian officers who worked with the British authorities to run the affairs, especially the education, and deal with that region. But in the pre-British Hadramaut, around 950 Common Era, an eighth generation descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, a man by the name of Ahmad ibn Isa al-Muhajir, so who's Ahmad ibn Isa ibn Muhammad ibn Ali al-Uraydi ibn Ja'far al-Sadiq ibn Muhammad al-Baqir ibn Ali Zayn al-Abidin ibn Imam al-Hussein, migrated from Basra because of like turbulence and issues and problems that were in Basra. He migrated, running away from Iraq to that region in order to stay away from the fitna. And this figure and this theme of staying away from the fitna is very important, because we will see this appearing in the life of Habib Abu Bakr, and it's an oft-repeated theme. He calls that way, the way of Ahmad ibn Isa al-Muhajir. As a Sayyid, we know that Ahlul Bayt sometimes had some clashes with the Umayyads, some clashes with the Abbasiyin. And then from the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Isa al-Muhajir, Habib Abu Bakr says this, there was a shift in the school of Ahlul Bayt, that no more sword. So they broke the sword. And he talks about that. He calls them Sadat as-Sulh, the masters of reconciliation, who broke the sword and raised the pen. And if you possibly will bring a photo of one of the books of Habib Abu Bakr called An-Namat al-Awsat, the Middle Way, where Habib was a master of logos. He used to make a lot of logos. So his logo for An-Namat al-Awsat is a sibha, a Quran, and a pen, and a broken sword, to symbolize that way. Just as a side note that you can think about, if you think about this, because logos tell you a lot about the ideas that are behind them, and you think of something like the Muslim Brotherhood, for example. What is the symbol of the Muslim Brotherhood? 2 swords and a mushaf in the middle, right? That tells you a lot, right? What is the logo of Saudi Arabia? 2 swords and a date tree. Not even Quran, it's a date tree. It's almost, we're forcing Bedouinism, right? We're forcing Bedouinism, whether by all means. Like, there is no escape, right? And then the other one is like, we're forcing Quran. But here you have a broken sword, and you will look at that. This region was the Sada, or the progeny of Ahmad ibn Isa al-Muhajir, Imam Ahmad ibn Isa al-Muhajir. From that time, they enjoyed high status in the region of Hadramaut. They became the patrons of education. They became responsible for education. They kept a distance from rulers and governors. And they established something called Hawta. Hawta's plural of Hawta is a sanctuary that's normally which has a shrine, where one of the Sayyids, possibly the most learned Sayyid of the region, after he passes away, he's buried there, right? And around that, they will build ribats for education. They will build hostels. They will build guest houses. And there will be some awqaf, some endowments to provide for the Hawta. And the eldest or the most learned of that progeny of this Sayyid, the enshrined Sayyid, will become the person, the caretaker of the Hawta. They have a title for him, they call him mansab. So you become familiar with these titles to this day, they exist. So the mansab is someone who's taking care of the hawta. What is the function of the hawta? The hawta was a place for education, and it was also a place for protection. So anyone who has committed a crime, he is safe if he enters the hawta. Anyone who has a problem with a tribe, and it is the time for the mawlid or the annual ziyarah of the enshrined wali, right? During that time, they cannot be attacked during the season in the hawta. And at the same time, tribes would strike their reconciliation treaties and agreements in the hawta. And because the mansab took an almost a kind of a non-sectarian, non-partisan position from all tribes, from rulers and masses, both rulers and masses had so much respect for the wali because of their religious understanding of that. If you break the rules of the hawta, you are afraid of the iqab, or the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now, is this concept something new? It's not new. It goes back to the early days of Islam. Quraysh used to practice that. People would come to the haram, and so hawta is another name for a haram or a sanctuary. It's a sanctuary. Now what happened is, because of that, the Sada were always entrusted with the education. The Sada and the Mashayikh. The Mashayikh are those individuals who are learned, but they are not Sada. They basically chose to focus on education and leave government and leave rulership to the rulers. And that earned them both the respect of the masses and the respect of the rulers. That was the social arrangement of Hadramaut and of many Muslim countries. Really, the ulama have always been what they call the scholarly elite. They like to call them the scholarly elite. But the scholars in the Muslim world, they are mediators, bringers of peace. They knew that this is their role. That continued to be the case until as I said, colonial interest in Aden in 1839, where the Brits decided to keep Aden for themselves. And they were not interested in the hinterland Hadramaut, in the inner land Hadramaut, for various reasons. Number one, it's not agricultural land on a massive scale. It does not have strategic purposes and strategic benefits and all of that. But what has happened, there was issues of war and fights between different tribes inside. Each one claimed a sultanate of their own. So a sultanate in Tarim, a sultanate in Shabwa, a sultanate in Qaidun, a sultanate in Daw'an, a sultanate in Al-Mukalla. So small sultanates, literally almost like a village ruler or something like that. And then all of a sudden, the Brits decided that they are interested in the inland Hadramaut because they wanted some form of manipulation of education. There was some emerging petrol being discovered and loads of other things. So they sent this man, who is a very interesting personality, Harold Ingrams. And this man is very, very influential, because Harold Ingrams used to be in Zanzibar. And he had an experience, a really influential experience in changing the education system in Zanzibar. And because of his success in Zanzibar, the Brits decided to send him to Yemen. So in 1937, he came to Yemen and he did something called the Ingrams Treaty, or the Ingrams Pact, which was a treaty that Harold Ingrams brought all the tribes and the sultans together. Not for their own benefit, actually he became technically the uncrowned sultan. So he became the mediator. It's almost a Lawrence of Arabia in South Arabia, Harold Ingrams. You can look up some of the works of Harold Ingrams. He has a 16-volume book called The Records of Yemen, from almost like 150 years, Records of Yemen. And he has another book called Yemen, a small book on the Imams of the Zaydi Imams and so on and so forth. And his daughter, Layla Ingrams, and his wife as well, they all lived in that region. And he actually pretended to be praying, and he used to dress like a proper Arab and he used to. His wife has brought for the first time his daughter Layla Ingrams. I can't remember the name of his wife, but she is the first one who took photos of the Sayyid's houses in the land Hadramaut. Harold Ingrams was very influential because he contributed to the change of education. He contributed to the change of the judicial system, which was based on the Qada al-Shar'i, the Sharia courts within Hadramaut. He did a lot of things. The Brits were in Aden, and based on Harold Ingram's idea, they decided to unite these people in Hadramaut. So they made something called the Federation of South Arabia and the Protectorate of South Arabia. That was based on the suggestion of Ingram, which these two covered what we knew as South Yemen, bringing all of these sultanates together. For a brief period, that was successful. But what has happened towards the end is because Harold Ingrams decided that since he is negotiating kind of a peaceful life between all of the sultanates, he will give them autonomy, and they will give him access to education and training their tribesmen to become formal armies. Now, when you change the life of Bedouins and they have access to modern life and they get training in Aden to colleges, and people went into new colleges and schools in order to be trained to become clerks and teachers and civil servants and all of that stuff. These people also opened their eyes to the new lifestyles. So mainly the army officers who were trained, they opened their eyes to new ideas. It just happened that at that time there was the military coup in 1952 in Egypt, which was a Marxist military coup. Jamal Abdel Nasser and his group. And Marxist ideas traveled, especially nationalist ideas, traveled to Hadramaut. And these people who came to Sudan to get some training, went to Egypt to get some training, took these ideas and they said, well, if our country can be such a civilized country, why don't we get rid of the Brits? So in fact, the Brits introduced those Yemenis into modern lifestyles, and then they got nationalism from somewhere else. So they started guerrillas to kick out the Brits. And that's when the British occupation, colonization ended in November 1967. And Yemen, South Yemen, became a Marxist regime. PRSY, People's Republic of South Yemen, or PDRY, People's Democratic Republic of South Yemen, from 1967 until 1980, when South Yemen kind of like got rid of its Marxist regime and united with northern Yemen. It is in this that Habib Abu Bakr, rahimahullah ta'ala, was born in this Yemen. I'm going to talk about this in a second. That he was born in 1947, 26th of May 1947. As we said, that the Saad Alawi were established, essentially their kind of like stronghold was Tarim, but they did not stay only in Tarim. They spread all over because their da'wah is about education, so they would go to different places. So that the father of Habib Abu Bakr al-Mashur, Sayyid Ali al-Mashur, was invited by the Sultan of a place of a small sultanate called Al-Awaliq al-Sufla, the lower Awlaqi, which is close to Aden in a place called Ahwar, the city of Ahwar, about 3 hours away from Yemen. Literally in this region, this is Aden, Ahwar is here. So Sayyid Ali al-Mashur was invited by the Sultan of Al-Awaliq as an educator to come and lead the education in the region. So he came with his, he was not married, he came, he used the masjid, the local masjid, as a school, and until he built a new building for the school, for his school, which he called Al-Madrasa Al-Maymuna. And in 1942, that's in 1942, then he got married to a local, Sayyida Khadija. I think her name is Khadija, if I remember. And they had 9 children. Habib Abu Bakr was possibly the second. He then was born in Ahwar. And when he wrote his own biography, and I'm going now to mention this, Habib Abu Bakr, as I said, he wrote his own biography in small books. Each one is between 150 to 200 pages. So in total, you're talking about 700-800 pages. Each one covers a specific stage of his life. The first here is called Al-Hafr ala Jidar al-Dhakira, engraving on the wall of memory. You have to be accustomed to his symbolic language as well. So he calls it engraving on the wall of memory, life's journey between reality and shells. And he means every word that he says. So he means by reality, the reality that he was born in. Shells are the changes that happened and came to Ahwar, which was a village. They look very big, but they are very hollow. That volume covers 1947 to 1977. Because when Yemen became a Marxist country, as I said, he grew up with his father. He stayed in Ahwar for the first, you can say, 25 years of his life. And when Yemen became a Marxist country, the new regime decided that those who are traditionally trained cannot be teachers anymore. They have to have formal education. So at the age of 22, as a married man, he had to go and study his prep and secondary and go for university in Aden. So this covers up to that time. In that time, that these first 30 years of the life of Habib Abu Bakr, which he depicts in Al-Hafr ala Jidar al-Dhakira, or engraving on the wall of memory, I have selected 3 locations that he talks a lot about. One of them is the father. He talks about his father quite a lot. He says, he almost mentions his father in every page. In fact, we can say that the Habib's father, and the word Ab, father, is so present in his life. Not only in his biography, but later on. So for example, when he compares modern education with traditional education, he calls traditional education Al-Madrasa Al-Abawiyya, the fatherly school. While he calls modern education Al-Madrasa Al-Anawiyya. So there's Abawiyya with a ba, fatherly, and the other is Anawiyya from Ana, I, the egocentric school. So he's telling you that the problem with the modern education, it's centered around the self. It's a self-centered education where the student does not take from anyone whom they have long company with. He talks about al-manhaj al-abawi, the fatherly way, as opposed to al-manhaj al-anawi. And we're not talking just about schooling here. It's about life in general. People who become individualistic, they are not connected to any silsila, not connected to any chain of transmission, as opposed to people who are connected to chains of transmission. He's talking about an established tradition as opposed to uprooted human beings. And that's one of the aspects of modernity that he talks about. So he talks about, when he talks about that time with his father, he says it's perfectly engraved on his memory that it shielded him from the challenging times. So his relation with his father was a shield. He believes in the tradition as a shield that can protect young generations from the changes. He said that also that his father kept a corrective close eye on him all the times. And he did not see this as a restriction. Nowadays we see, for example, correction and father's guidance and all of that as a restriction. But he actually, Habib did not see it as a restriction. He saw it as a protection of a young plant that needs to be strong and able to face life on its own. He talks about how his father was even helping him choose the games that he played as a young man. He talks about his father as a sincere community worker. He talks about his father as a principal teacher. He talks about his father as a disciplining guide. He talks about his father, and he says he is a protective father who foresaw dangers afar and prevented them from hitting his son. So that can tell you something about how he sees the relation between generations, and how he sees, when we talk about ilm al-sa'a, we will see that one of the problems of the modern age is this disconnection, these disconnected human beings. One of the things that he, as you can see, he sees his father as really a prominent figure and a very important individual. He also mentions that when the education committee came from Aden to inspect on Al-Madrasa Al-Maymuna, which they found to be a very exemplary school, yet they said if these students should further their education and there has to be some change in the curriculum and so on and so forth, he said that they suggested that his name is to be put amongst the students who should continue their education in Aden. But his father crossed that out and took it out, and he said no. And he said he said the father intentionally removed his name from the list, insisting that he stays under his supervision, depriving him the chance to go to public schools, and consoling him. He said, if you persist and show patience, you will be better than them all. So again, he also talks about how his father used to be very happy when he excels in certain subjects, and when he would pick up certain books and reads them, he will say that's not going to benefit you in the future. So we can see that. I don't want to delve deep into the role of the father. There's a lot, but that can tell us how he sees the role of teachers and the role of fathers. As we will see, the life of Habib Abu Bakr will end actually with another father, will end with another teacher somewhere else. So it's almost like a full circle. He also tells us that his father, when he came to Ahwar, it was a rural society full of superstitions and strange practices. So one of the things that the father did, in addition to education, and in addition to being the imam of the masjid, in addition to being the community leader, in addition to actually even establishing a girls' department in Al-Madrasa Al-Maymuna for the first time. So he was in favor of what? Educating women and kind of liberating women. So Habib does not have an issue there, but he has an issue of liberating women on European terms. That's what he always talks about that. He always talks about the role of women, understanding the role, and that this is the real liberation, not coveting and wanting and desiring the role of somebody else in the society, which can lead to problems. So one of the things that he talks about his father, that there was multiple superstitions and un-Islamic practices that dominated the people's daily life. And what happened is Habib Ali al-Mashur, the father of Habib Abu Bakr, he fought these things. And he realized that the way forward is educating people. That in order to liberate these villages, they have to do that through education. Someone might ask, so where is the role of the women in the life of Habib Abu Bakr if it's all about father? Habib Abu Bakr actually talks about two women while he's talking about his father. One is his sister. He had a sister called Qamar. As I told you, he had a brother before him. He was the second. And then Qamar was after him. She lived 9 years with them. I think she died possibly at the age of 11 or 9, something like that. She lived kind of like 9 years with them. And he talks quite a lot about her. First of all, he says that he says that she was almost the what's the word? Yeah, she was the kind of the balancing component of the relation between him and his brother. So while he saw his relation, him and his brother, was based on fighting and for things, he saw her as someone who kind of brought that down to a form of, yeah. Her presence was a cool breeze, he says, that created a desired balance between her brothers. But when she died at the age of 9, he says her death left a vacuum behind and taught him sadness for the first time. So that's like that again reveals another aspect that's very interesting. The second woman he talks about is his first wife, Khadija al-Attas. That's his first wife. So his mother is Shaykh, actually. Her name is Shaykh. So his wife, Khadija al-Attas, he married at the age of 20. And she was very supportive of his. She decided, as he said, to take a second place in the family, giving him the role to educate the children, to lead the children, to inspire them, and she would take care of them, she would rear them, she would educate them at young age, but giving him the lead. And he says that it is in this that kind of family that you have a mature traditional experience. Then there is something so interesting about her, because she had some education, some type of formal education. And when he, at the age of 22, in Marxist Yemen, they said to him and his father, you cannot lead this school anymore because you don't have formal education, so you have to study. His father was quite senior in age at the time. And under Marxist Yemen, not only that, but ulama were persecuted and many of them were killed. Luckily, one of the students of Al-Madrasa Al-Maymuna became the president of Yemen. So he facilitated for Habib's father to escape to Jeddah. That's when he decided to leave. And Habib Abu Bakr himself, at the time, he had to make a choice of having to go and study in Aden. At the time, he says that his wife offered him her certificates. She said, like very simply, like, take my certificates and you can use them as your credentials. And he said he compares this with his father's refusal to do formal education. Like these are like kind of like two modes of approaching. Anyway, he went to Aden, completed his prep education in 1969 and his secondary education in 1973, and then he studied for a faculty of education, moved completely to Aden to study for the faculty of education, and when he moved, he decided to find a house for the young family because he couldn't go commute back and forth to Ahwar. Under Marxist Yemen, these ulama were persecuted, so he had to go through a system, a national record, to find housing. And then when finally he got the housing after a year or so, they were living with their in-laws. When he found the housing, the day he prepared the house to move in, his wife, who was giving birth on that day, passed away on that same day. And he wrote a lot about her. So now, without children, his children had to join their grandfather in Jeddah, and he was alone. He had to do a few things before he decides to leave Yemen. So he says about his wife, and I'm going to read this. He said, she was a mother, a teacher, a planner, a friend, and a serious voice. She was a woman who feared darkness, mice, and the night bird sounds. She was a wise mind that appreciated marital life with its bitterness and sweetness, patient when patience was required, merciful when compassion was needed, and amicable when amicability was prime. A helping hand, a loving heart, and a caring soul, a beacon that lit my professional and intellectual life. Like the sun, she shone over my whole being, a fertile soul that brought forth fruits and vegetation. So this is how he talks about his wife, and that's how he perceives women in light of his father.